the first out of my community to be a member of parliament, it is an honor that people have, I'd say, given me that confidence, entrusted me with their franchise to be able to come to parliament. And I see that when I go into the community many times, people are still very, very happy, very elated.
From the heart of St. Cuthbert's Mission, also known as Pukuri Village, emerges a leader whose voice has echoed across the nation. Lenox Shuman, a proud son of the soil, has worn many hats throughout his journey, each marked by resilience, purpose, and pride in his Indigenous heritage. Among his many accomplishments, one stands as a historic first. On September 2nd, 2020, he became the first Indigenous Guyanese to be elected Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly.
When I look at Indigenous peoples in Guyana, I think there are a lot of things, a lot of symbolism that comes with that office, and that I think that I would have championed. A big one is not only with becoming the first Deputy Speaker in Parliament. I think going into the court in my traditional attire was one. Going into Parliament with my traditional attire was two. We have a right to do that. I think sometimes if we don't exercise those rights, they tend to get diminished and people don't respect them. But I think above all, what it meant to me is that that I was opening doors for Indigenous peoples. That Indigenous peoples should look at not only the traditional sectors, that we should look at our right to also occupy a political space. Growing up in Pakuri was challenging, no doubt. I grew up and I don't want to get into a political frame, but it's important to have context. I grew up under the PNC time, then President Barnum. And we would walk from my community all the way out to the highway, which is about a 4-hour walk, just to be able to get a hamper. And then we'd get there, windows would close and say, well, we don't have anything. We'd have to walk back. So 8 hours without food. We have water along the way. It was hard. My dad was in the military, he was busy serving the country. My mom emigrated and went to Canada. And it is her hard work and the little money that she would send back that kind of kept us going. I think when I look at the difficulty that I faced as a young child growing up, the greatest source of inspiration for me through my journey, it actually comes from a lot of places. I look back at my family's history as core to it, having been born into a family of leaders, and I cannot pinpoint a single person that would have been that key influence. But I look at the work of the women in my life. I speak more of my mom, my sisters, my wife, my aunts. They have been champions. They have done tremendous work, and I know many other single mothers out there who are championing the cause for their children. My passion for leadership was derived from coming from a long history of leaders. I think before Guyana was even Guyana, my family have been leading our Indigenous peoples, the Arawak nation of Pakuri. And I looked at my grandfather, my uncles, my dad, and they have all been leaders in our community. And at least in my generation, I did not see anyone wanting to take that up, so I saw it as a rite of passage. For me, leadership is something that you're born a leader or you grow into leadership. It is not something that you can just wake up one day and say, you know what, I want to be a leader. It is something that is cultivated over time, that you really have to work. If it is not genetically brought upon you, you really have to grow into it, and you have to start from the ground level. I look at all of those things, and then when I became Tushao, chief of my community, I subsequently challenged the system that operated at the National Tushao's Council. And through that challenge, I was elected the Deputy Speaker. One of the messages that I would share with young Indigenous Guyanese is don't give up. Also, do not confine yourself. I know that life could be very difficult. I know that going to school as a young man, in an Indigenous community, there are so many pressures, peer pressure being one of them, familial, economic. There are all of these pressures, but what I would say is do not permit those problems to overcome you. Strive for something bigger, strive for something higher. So as I continue down this path, there are a few things that I want to leave as a legacy. The first one being ensuring that Indigenous peoples understand that we have a right to occupy space of decision making. The second is to ensure that we are not left behind, to ensure that we are included in the economic and, I'd say, the tapestry of Guyana as we go forward. But for me, the greatest part is, one, we're young people, where I would have inspired some of our young Indigenous peoples to say, you know what, I can do that. I want to get in there. I want to not necessarily follow in Lenox Shuman's footsteps, but I want to surpass everything that every other Indigenous leader would have done. I think Stephen Campbell would have left the mark in these hallowed halls. But now I want for people to come and say, you know what, I want to surpass the Vibra D'Souza, the Philip Duncan, the Sidney Allicock, the Lenox Shuman, the Stephen Campbells. I want to aspire to something greater. And for us to be able to open that door and leave it for people.